Okay, on behalf of Pur-Logic Solutions, I would like to thank everyone who was able to join us for today's webinar showcasing Sage Data and Analytics as part of our ongoing series, Get More from Your Sage Software. We are recording today's webinar and we'll have copies of those available. We will be posting it on our website as well as on our YouTube channel. We will also make time for some Q&A today at the end of our webinar. I'm going to send it over now to Trey from Sage Data and Analytics.
Thank you, Angela, and it's really a pleasure to be here, and it's so great to talk to the Pur-Logic customers. And for those of you watching it after the fact, welcome to you as well. So what we want to do today is talk a little bit about Sage Data and Analytics, specifically with a slant towards the financial reporting side of things. You know, there's so many good things that we do within Sage Data Analytics that probably the right place to start is just to help people understand what it's all about. As our name implies, we are focused on both the capturing of data from your ERP, such as Sage 300, as well as your other sources of data. So those could be a CRM application, it could be another line of business application that's got a SQL database behind it, could be a cloud-based application on a web storefront, any of a number of different things. What we do is we use Sage Data and Analytics as a means of reaching out to all of those different items, bring them together into a cloud-based environment, and from that cloud-based environment, we have a data warehouse that then serves up the analytics requirements that organizations have. And so the analytics that we deliver out of the box really are for all different constituencies: finance, AR, AP, purchasing, sales, inventory management. There's a full range of analytics and content that's available for all those different types of users. But again, today we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about the things that we're doing specifically around financial reporting. And so when we talk about financial reporting and we talk about the things that we do natively within our product, there's a lot of things that I think many of you as organizations are endeavoring to do using probably Excel, extracts of data from the ERP, things of that nature. I would probably imagine that you're watching this webinar with at least a perspective on, could my life be a little bit easier? Could things be a little bit more achievable? And you know, so there's some key capabilities around our platform that certainly enable that. For starters, there are elements that come just simply within the box in terms of calculations that are really best practice financial calculations to support the business. We have a number of those key metrics, and really because of the cloud-based nature of our product, everything is available within the browser, and that means two things. It means firstly, you're not necessarily having to use a particular product on your desktop to build any types of reports or build things for yourself or others. Furthermore, you can more readily collaborate with others as you share analytical content, allow them to look at, you know, kind of the top level view of maybe some of the financial reporting and financial analytics you have, but more so use the interactivity of the solution to kind of drill down further, get beyond a simple financial statement and move into a little bit more of the detail, all the way down to the underlying ledger records, if you like. And it's that transparency that certainly is a key part of this. The other elements that are just naturally reflected as bullets on the screen really talk to the things that we do with the data. So for example, if you do happen to have a situation where you do have multiple companies, we can support the consolidation of that information across those multiple companies. You'll still want to do the intercompany eliminations, those eliminating entries within one of the companies themselves. But when the data is all brought together, you have the ability to look at company A versus company B, or a consolidated view of both companies, or more than two companies for that matter. We do support multiple fiscal calendars. So if an organization is operating slightly differently, and I was actually talking to another Sage customer just a little while ago, that they have an entirely different fiscal orientation from a chart of accounts and a fiscal calendar standpoint between their US operations and their Brazilian operations. And so it's very interesting, you know, to kind of explore the ways that we kind of uniquely support their reporting requirements. The other piece that's really key is, you know, is you do potentially deal in multiple currencies. The data platform supports that multi-currency orientation, and more so supports the scenario where you need to conform with GAAP rules around the conversion of various financial amounts. So lots to really explore in terms of the solution. These are certainly big pieces that we're delivering out of the box, but to talk to it a little bit more specifically from an out of the box perspective, we do have a full range of dashboards, as some of you have seen in the past, from a chief financial officer financials overview type dashboard, for receivable and payables analysis for those AR and AP stakeholders, and even elements that support, kind of looking more holistically at cash flows and expense monitoring and profit and loss analyses. All of these are different dashboards that really kind of serve as that, excuse me, starting point to allow you as an organization to really figure out what is analytically meaningful for you. Certainly, there are financial statements that need to be produced, but without the fuller range of analytical content to allow you to ask questions and get answers, there's really just kind of a subset of the capabilities in that regard. So we're certainly looking forward to potentially exploring with you individually as customers how you might enrich and move beyond just simply financial reporting. In terms of the metrics, I mentioned that we had many. We actually have 70 financial metrics that are part of this solution. As you can see on the right-hand side, we have, various metrics around activity and leverage and liquidity, things like cash ratio, working capital, debt ratio, the day sales outstanding, the cash to cash cycle, the inventory days. All of these different items naturally serve as building blocks. And those building blocks make their way onto things like the dashboard that you see in the middle. And the dashboard that you see in the middle of the screen, you'll notice that we have at the very top net sales, gross margin, operating profit, ARAP, cash to cash cycle underneath activity, and return on assets. But as you look into the individual charts, you also have similar items that are showing up there. So you have net sales and cost of goods sold on the gross margin over time chart. And the operating profit over time provides you with some income insights, some expense insights, and the operating profit percentage. So lots of really fundamental building blocks from a financial analytics and financial calculation standpoint. And so what that really ultimately means is it gives you the right opportunity to bring forward the way that you want to look at the data, be it financial or otherwise. In terms of the statements that we do support, just in terms of kind of capturing it on the slide here, and we'll take a look at a few of these live and interactively as well. But what you'll notice is that we have a number of financial statement templates that are very customizable, meaning you're not stuck with the format, you're not stuck with the placement of groupings and the individual row items, but rather it just serves to get you going with Sage data and analytics. As a result, we have these templates that are in the categories of profit and loss, statements of cash flow, forecasting, as we see on this particular screen. And then as I kind of advance the slides here, we also have support for balance sheets, trial balances, and more than just a simple balance sheet, there's multiple ways that we can look at this across the balances from a monthly basis, looking at a consolidated balance sheet for the company, and doing similar things with the trial balances as well. And last but not least, in terms of kind of things that tie into the analytics experience, one of them is exploration. And as we hover over elements that are in the charts, as we work with the information that's available in the reports, we do some filtering. But more so, as you'll notice on the top right graphic there, we have the ability on the, in this case, the statement of cash flow, to really navigate through that chart of accounts and drill into the individual accounts as well. And so that ability to expand and collapse those hierarchies of information means that you really can fine tune your questions that you're looking to get answered. And certainly when you see a number that looks a little bit different than you would have possibly envisioned, you have the ability to go further exploring into the individual details as well. And so that ability to drill through on all of the underlying information becomes a very powerful element to give you the deeper insights that one would expect. And then additionally, from a consolidating standpoint, we are able to, within the sourcing of the information, pull from multiple instances potentially of Sage 300, if that's what your organization is running, or if you simply just have multiple companies, to pull in those multiple companies and choose, which one is the primary company, if you will, and the remaining companies could be available for further analysis. What's really powerful in terms of what we do is we do have that ability to bring in a very standard set of chart of accounts into our calculations. So what you see in terms of the mappings at the very bottom of this slide means that whether you have contiguous ranges of accounts that make up something like cash or your expenses or inventory for that matter, or if you have a sporadic kind of placement of accounts, within your chart of account structure, those items can map in very easily and be supported readily with the Sage data and analytics tool. So not only do we have the robust elements around reporting and analysis, we also have a very quick path for you getting started, getting your data into the solution. And I'd be very remiss if I didn't talk about the aspect of currency conversion. And what we ultimately and very flexibly do is we use currency conversion as we're reading in the records. And so we're looking and we're comparing appropriately against either the time period, in which the transaction occurred, or depending on other calculations, based on GAAP rules, having to look at the latest rate for that particular time period to ensure that when the data is stored within the database, not only do you have your primary currency, but you also have, kind of the secondary or functional currency, meaning that, you have the flexibility to see the information from a reporting perspective, but you also have the ability to look at the information from a native currency perspective. And so we're very proud of the fact that we've engineered that in, because that's so often that becomes a challenge for a lot of organizations, particularly as you start to consolidate across multiple companies that maybe are slightly differently focused in terms of the currency types. Similarly, with fiscal calendars, if an organization has a slightly different fiscal orientation, there are capabilities within the product to create a consolidated fiscal calendar, consolidated date. In other words, January through December in the example might be the traditional kind of 12 periods for the primary company. However, a secondary company, they might be running on a different fiscal orientation, say July 1 through June 30. And so we can actually say period 1 maps to period 1, or whatever is the approach that you as an organization want to take, but to ensure that you're able to actually look at performance, over disparate periods of time across disparate fiscal calendars. And one of the key elements, before I maybe get into a live look at the technology itself, is the concept of report packs. And so report packs are an incredibly powerful vehicle for sharing and socializing content. So those of you that maybe are struggling a bit today because you're having to package up information for senior leadership teams or board members, or maybe even external stakeholders like equity partners and the like, now you have a tool set that can more automatically pull that information together, generate a resulting document that we call as a report pack that can be comprised of whatever set of analytics that you choose to include. So that could be a variety of different financial statements, could be a combination of financial statements and other reporting, but ultimately it's put out in a single PDF document that really becomes a professional deliverable for those people that just simply need to see a report in a very static way. And so the other pieces that I did want to mention just briefly is this can be distributed via email, as I think I said, or it can be made available, for people to access online. And the last piece around the report pack technology that isn't exactly specific to financial reporting, but it's a great feature of the system, is you can set it up so that you monitor different metrics that are on the system, whether they be financially oriented or supply chain oriented. And when you pass a certain threshold, so maybe it's cash on hand, or maybe it's a certain supply chain metric around inventory levels, that you can then push information automatically as an alert to the individuals that may be responsible for that area, and include as part of that message some analytics that they need to see so that they can then further act upon them. So with that, we'll actually do my most technically challenging thing, which is pull up a browser here. And I should have that ready to go, which I do. And so what you're seeing on the screen at the moment, and I'm going to actually drill this back up if I can. There we go. So this would be kind of the starting point. And again, this is a CFO or a financial overview dashboard. What you'll notice is that our dashboards have a variety of different filter criteria that are introduced at the top. Certainly understand financial statements are really a key and common vernacular for communicating about the business, but in an ongoing fashion, it's our experience that people, particularly CFOs and the like, want to be able to look across all aspects of the business in kind of a single view like we offer here, and the ability to ask additional questions and get additional answers. So those additional questions could take the form of, I want to select a subset of the companies, which I'm going to do here. And so that starts to kind of shift the information that we're seeing. And you'll notice that that's changing dynamically and quickly. That's because we are a cloud-based application, and that means that we're not putting any burden on your ERP to get this information out, but rather we're pulling the data out, we're storing it within the cloud, and we're optimizing it for the questions that people might have to ask. Furthermore, people might see a data point and say, gosh, that's pretty interesting. I'd like to drill down on that and see a little bit further, which they can do. And when they go to explore, they can actually also choose to right click, and when they right click, well, they can drill back up, which would be a little boring at the moment. They could create a detailed report, which we can show in a moment as well, or they can open related analytical content. And since we're talking about the financial side of things, what I'll do is I'll open an income statement dashboard, which is really a related piece of analytical content. A little bit light on the budgetary figures for this sample data, but what you'll notice, again, there's the filtering elements across the top. There's the ability to look into various other elements, profit, actual versus budget, operating profits, those sorts of things. But if I do have a question, as I think I mentioned a moment ago, about any of the numbers, that we can actually choose a number, we can right click and say create detailed report. What creating the detailed report does for us in this particular circumstance is it automatically pulls together everything that's related to the ledger transactions that we're drilling through on. As a result, we may have a few columns too many here in terms of some columns that maybe don't make sense for our analysis. But what we can also do is we can aesthetically format this. So maybe it's the 7 or 8 columns we really want to see every time we drill through. The other aspect to this is because it's sample data, we're looking at 15 to 20 records. However, in the real world, we probably would be looking at a much larger volume, possibly multiple pages of data. That's where tools like Excel tend to come in and work incredibly well, because you can take a large data set that would be the result of a detailed view like this, export it out to Excel, and then further do some offline analysis if you choose to do so. If you're sitting there saying, gosh, they're never going to take away my Excel, well, this is a great way for you to retain aspects of your Excel. We would simply encourage you that with the other elements of Sage Data and Analytics, that you look to aspects of the browser to understand some of the broader capabilities of visualizing the data, sharing the information with others, and of course, and because this is recorded, this is probably going to be fun for people to play back later, you can still use tools like Excel to get to the data that Sage Data and Analytics stores as well. So with that, I'll simply navigate back because we are in a browser here, and that takes us back to where we were previously. There are a number of additional elements that we could go to and explore. I'll probably just touch on one real quickly. That is that I can open a related dashboard, in this case for the accounts receivable oriented decision maker. So I'm able to look across the data, to look at things from an AR perspective. And again, we're providing these various views into your Sage ERP data as a starting point. And that starting point is really intended to be exactly that. It might be beneficial to some audiences directly out of the gate. For others, you might see it as a platform that you can then articulate the changes that you'd like to make. Either one of those is incredibly suitable scenarios, because the alternative of staring at a blank worksheet and trying to come up with information is a very painful one, I think, for most of the ERP users. So with that said, this is the consumer experience. This is a very end user oriented experience of interacting with the dashboard, interacting with some of the reports, those sort of things. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shift gears and move out of this consumer oriented experience into more of the designer oriented experience. And what you'll notice right away is that we now have this nice little Sage ribbon at the top, and we also have a folder structure that allows us to really kind of navigate elements that are important. Furthermore, because I'm a designer, I can build charts, tables, dashboards, all sorts of other items. And from a user perspective, I'm also, as a designer, able to access all of the self-study materials. And so that's an important part of our overall solution. We're a very robust education platform behind Sage Data and Analytics. Not only do we have this full range of self-study materials, but we also have a full training curriculum that's available through Sage University that allows for people to learn the best practices around building analytical reports, around building financials and other things, which I'll touch on in just a few moments. But if I change tabs here, this simply brings me over into a design environment that doesn't have that start page, but more so has some other items for us to look at. And so the way that I've actually pulled these items up is I've navigated the folder structures that are here. And so for starters, if I go into, let me collapse that so it's easier. If I go into finance and I go into general ledger and I go into financial statements, I have a number that are here. I can go into consolidated. Let's look at this consolidated balance sheet by company. Okay, and so what you'll notice is that you have your individual company side by side on the balance sheet. You'll notice also these little carrots here indicate that this is expandable. So I can actually navigate the chart of accounts and explore at a different level. Now, what's very important is all of this information is, again, talking to our cloud-based data warehouse, meaning that it's not pulling it directly from the ERP on this report, but rather indirectly. And what you'll also notice is that, we have a full range of different items that kind of work across this. Now, oftentimes we get the questions of, not so much on balance sheets, but particularly on income statements, can we format this a little bit differently? Can we kind of move some things around? Absolutely, that's the case. And so if I go back here to the expanded folders that we have, I'll maybe just open up a slightly different example. Well, let's do the balance sheet one while I've still got it. So this one is really looking at the reporting currency versus, kind of the primary currency or the functional currency. So we're looking at those two items, side by side in this particular case. But if I go back off to, I'll pull up this profit and loss currency analysis, it's fine. So what you'll notice is you have the ability to do the same filtering here in the design environment that a user would be able to do in a consumer type view. I can look at all companies, or in this case, I might want to look at an individual company. And you'll notice as I add companies, the values will change. And so we are basically doing that pulling together of the company information in this particular view. Now, if people wanted to kind of change characteristics of this report, change aspects of its design, because I'm in the design mode, I just have to remember not to save this because I don't want to destroy our example. But what we can do is we can take something like company, for example. I can drag the individual companies up to the beginning of the columns. And so what that has done, let me maybe collapse this. What that has done is it took us from a single MTD and YTD to multiple companies side by side. As I choose which ones I would like to see, say maybe just company one, then I can look at just that individual company, but then I can also have it build out and look at all the individual companies in that way too. So there's a lot of subtle tweaks that can be made. Furthermore, from a design perspective, we have some P&L totals and operating expense sets, so those can serve as kind of elements. If I want to simply move something around, so I want operating expenses to come after selling or whatever the case might be. If people didn't see me move that, you'll notice that I did just kind of slide that down and move that up. It's intended to be that easy for you as a designer to format for the business and what it is that they want to see, and to ensure that you're using the underlying building blocks that we provide as part of the core solution. So a couple of last things just to kind of cover off as we kind of continue to explore here. Certainly one element of this is, on the cash flow side, and I think that I've got the cash flow dashboard up, but I'll pull it up again. And so here we have our statement of cash flows, and we have a couple of charts that kind of correspond and support that. Again, we can look into kind of the individual items. We can, certainly, as I navigate through this, explore asking questions, getting answers. I could further create detailed reports as that kind of showed. There's a lot of things that we can do, and we can also kind of go back in time if we choose. So that's another kind of intrinsic element. We're always certainly looking to report on kind of what is the most current or what's happening in the current time. But the reality is periodically you do need to go take that look back. And so there's that very flexible element of time and time intelligence. That's where things like these year-to-date calculations come from and a variety of other elements. So what I might do just really quickly here is I might build something very basic as a financial report, just to help people kind of see how things come together. And to do that, I'm going to actually not deal with the folder structure, but start with a blank canvas. So here we have the very blank canvas on the left-hand side, similar to how you might work with a pivot table on Excel. We have various placeholders for query items. And then on the far right-hand side is the model itself. And so within the model itself, there are two different kinds of elements. There's the numeric elements that we call our measures. Everything below the measures is a topic or a dimension from the ERP. And so as I scroll this, well, there's a lot of topics in the ERP, and that's to be understood as kind of a standard thing within the Sage Data and Analytics toolset, because what we're actually doing is we're giving you visibility to all facets of the ERP out of the box. Now, what we might do is we might simply, as we would encourage somebody who's going through training, go after the numbers they're interested in first. So again, just to highlight here briefly, we have different categories of calculations. So we have the activity calculations, we have some balance sheet oriented calculations, leverage, liquidity, other financial performance. So those are all different pieces that are calculations that we can really leverage out of the box. Furthermore, we can basically look at very simplistic elements like, I don't know, the actual amount. We'll put that onto the columns. And a little bit discouraging that that the ERP doesn't balance out. But we'll say that's a sample data issue. So I'm going to collapse the measures here. You might remember I scrolled and was scrolling kind of forever. Now when I scroll, I only see probably 12 to 15 different dimensions or topics that I can analyze by. And so from here, I can really start to build some things out. So I'm going to do some very basic stuff. I'm going to go into our common chart of accounts. Now what I do know, just based on the fact that this has a pyramid-shaped icon, that there are multiple levels to this. And so because there are multiple levels to this, I know that I probably, in this case, maybe just want the profit and loss accounts. And I'll go ahead and drag them to the rows. And so I'm going to go ahead and choose to drill this down. So we can kind of expand and look at what's underneath it. And I could continue to expand. Maybe I want to do just an expense-oriented analysis. Okay, so that's my starting point. Now, what I can do is, in terms of building additional elements into this for analysis and information, I can take company as an example. I can put it up on the slicers, as we've seen pretty commonly, where that gives me a drop down that I can look at the individual companies or all companies. And also what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop companies on the columns. And so we can kind of see how that plays out across all of those. There's not a lot of data in any of these companies with the exception of company one. So we'll kind of remove this for this time being for that example. Now, what I can do is I can add an element of date and time to this. And again, remember, we do support a couple of different things. We support a calendar-based orientation at January 1 through December 31. If you have one or more fiscal calendars based on the companies you're integrating, you can support those additional fiscal calendars here as well. I'll expand fiscal, and what I'll do is I'll show that this YQMD stands for year, quarter, month, and date. So those are the different levels that I have. I can drag years up to the columns. I notice I've got some data in 2021 and 2022. That's pretty good. So I'm going to actually remove that for now. And what I want to do is I really want to highlight some of the aspects of the time functions that we have. And so we have a variety of different built-in time functions that can be used. We have the current period information. So I could do the current year-to-date, years to current, months to current. If I drag months to current onto the columns here, and I edit this, I want to do maybe a trailing 12 months. And I need to hit apply. And so what this does, and apologies, I don't have the biggest screen at the moment, but you see the most recent, 12 months in this example. Now, I don't want to do that long-term here, so I'm going to remove that. But what I do want to do is I want to use one other calculation or built-in time intelligence item for the current year. And so I'm going to drag that on. So now we've got 2021, 2022 as the current year. And that could be the same as current month, could be the same as current quarter. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the actual amount to the filter in the background just to clean that up. Now, the other thing that I can do is I could continue to navigate these calculations on this side, or I can simply right-click, drag and drop, and it gives me a contextual menu that pops up, and I can choose period to date. Actually, I'll do parallel period and do period in prior year. So current year, prior year. Let's go ahead and calculate a difference. Why not? So choose to create a custom formula. I won't move too fast, and I'll actually spell difference correctly here. And what I'll do is I'll say period in prior year. I'm going to subtract the current year from it. Oops. Move this guy around. Sorry about that. And I'm going to click apply. Okay. So now we've got our kind of difference, and this really allows us to do a range of things. We could continue to explore. We could continue to pull from various other areas, departments, divisions, those sorts of things. Or we could just simply start to build out more of a visualization. So I'll turn on the chart elements of this. And what that did is I turned on that chart. That gave me more ribbons to select from. Firstly, I can choose a different type of a chart. Full range of different visualizations all the way through to if you need to geographically represent data, you can do. In this case, I'm just going to choose that particular stacked bar. And the other thing that I probably want to do while I've got this menu up is I think I just want to look at the distribution for this one column. And so I'll just say select just that data. Now, when I interact with this and I expand, say, general expenses, I can see that this, expands out. Or as I kind of traverse, which I could get myself into trouble here if we've got a lot of accounts, but let's go ahead and expand administrative expenses as well. You can really start to explore, visually or within the table of information And it's really intended to be suitable to both those audiences, those that visually see data versus those that maybe like the structure of a tabular type format. Once I'm done with this and I'm particularly happy with it, I can save it off to my own personal folder, such as here underneath tray, or I can save it off to a public folder, and then it can become integral into a dashboard. It can be available to consumers. It can show up on the report packs in the various ways that we might put the information out to the users. And so it's really intended to be that straightforward and that approachable. And most of the time, organizations, especially those that are already struggling with or building financial type reports within tools like Excel, find this to be kind of a much easier approach to having a standard set of data that's continuously available to them without all of the challenges of having to pull data out of different other environments and tools. So with that, there's probably only a few other elements that I could show or talk to, before you're probably suitably overwhelmed. I probably will finish simply with the fact that there are a variety of different financial statements. So we have the balance sheets, we have the P&L, we also have the traditional trial balances and the like. So there's quite a different bit of ways that one can go. Let me just expand statements here, and we'll pull up the monthly movement analysis for the trial balance. And so this helps you kind of see, where we at from an opening and closing perspective, up to a certain date. So we can certainly change this date if we choose. If I chose to run it through November of 2021, I could see exactly where I was at. So there's all these different elements. The calculations underneath it are obviously helping you calculate against closing balances, opening balances, helping you understand, kind of the transition of information over those financial periods as well. So with that, I think we've covered probably a fair amount of ground. I'll actually go back to the slides, and in doing so, allow me to talk a little bit about the packaging and pricing of SD&A, because I know that's always something that people are curious about. So here we are on basically all the information you could possibly want to know about how we price and package Sage Data and Analytics. There are 3 different plans. So there's a standard plan, an advanced plan, and a premium. On the standard plan, actually across all of the plans, you'll notice there's pricing. And the pricing basically is a reflection of the annual cost of the software plus the hosting. So you're not having to invest any money in servers or licenses for databases or any of that sort of stuff. That's all within the scope of this software and hosting cost. And essentially the only other variable cost is as you work with Pur-Logic to get the solution implemented, there's a degree of professional services that goes along with the initial implementation and any particular ongoing requirements that you might have if your team's not able to kind of invest fully in learning the solution themselves. But under the standard plan and under all of the plans, the bolded elements kind of indicate the key characteristics that would shape the solution for you based on the plan type. So if you have 2 companies or less, then the standard plan might be a fit for you. The number of users, a single designer and 5 consumers, again, is a bit more on the entry-level side. So as we look to advanced and premium, that user count doubles. And again, as we go from advanced over to premium, we all go all the way up to 4 designers and 30 consumers. Other elements that are just naturally important here is we support more companies on the advanced plan. Premium has support for an unlimited number of companies. The data volume, that 10, 30, and 75 gigabytes, that means that's the volume of data that gets uploaded to the cloud and stored on the cloud. So even if you had a larger database, the reality is we're only typically pulling 20 or 30% of the data for all of the reporting and analytics that we tend to do. So that means that even with a 100 gigabyte database, one could still comfortably fit on the advanced plan. There are additional kind of nuances to this, not the least of which is if you want to refresh the data multiple times per day, the advanced and the premium plan allow for that. Basically, the footnote basically says that you would stay within the fair use policy, and on the advanced plan, you'd be working with Pur-Logic to schedule the refresh intervals around the data itself. Underneath limits, this basically just explains that you can go from 10 consumers to 15 consumers, from 30 gigabytes of storage to 55 gigabytes of storage, and 5 companies is your functional limit on the advanced plan. Similarly, there's more limits on the standard plan. So we believe there's a great value in this for any of the plans that people might choose. And as they move into the more premium plan, that's where we introduce some additional elements like additional data source connections. So if you're bringing in lots of other data sources, that might be a choice. We're also intrinsically building in the ability to connect Power BI and some other things there as well. So that is me talking for, gosh, a solid 40 minutes. And so, Angela, I don't know if there's any questions that have been posed that we want to go through, but at this point, I'd be really receptive to just answering any questions we may have.
Sure, we do have one. This question is, are we able to run SD&A on our own servers?
Oh, good question. So the answer is no. It is solely a hosted solution. And that really allows for us to keep kind of all aspects of the technology current within the cloud environment. The caveat or the benefit is run on premise or run in our cloud. You still have the same degree of connectivity to the data. We facilitate the connectivity to your local ERP instance through something we call as a data gateway. What that ultimately means, and we've experienced, with kind of multiple, Sage ERP customers at this point, is if they do have multiple instances that are running in different geographies, you can deploy the data gateways, read all that data together into the cloud, and then report in a very consolidated way across your business.
Excellent.
If that's the one question. I was going to say, if that's the one question, that was a great one question. So. But we know exactly how this works, and especially for anybody that might be viewing the recording, that we are very happy to support the further exploration of the Pur-Logic customers as they want to learn more about Sage Data and Analytics. The Pur-Logic team knows exactly where to find us, and we would be more than happy and very honored to be able to talk to people individually about this after they've had a chance to view the recording.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Trey. And thank you everyone for attending. And as Trey just said, if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to us. If you'd like to book a more in-depth demo, we can do that as well. And everyone will be receiving a copy of the recording shortly. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.